Today is Tuesday, June 16th, 2026, and today is National Fudge Day, which is a holiday dedicated to a dessert that exists because someone looked at chocolate and decided it should be even more chocolate. And after looking through today's stories, I noticed something unexpected. Each one involves structure. A speech that tried to hold a country together. An amusement ride that put people on a predictable track. And a movie that changed how audiences behaved in theaters. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone increasingly convinced that history is mostly people improvising with confidence. On June 16, 1858, Abraham Lincoln delivered what became known as his House Divided speech. At the time, Lincoln was not president. He was running for the U.S. Senate, and the speech was considered surprisingly bold. Drawing from a biblical phrase, Lincoln declared, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He was speaking about the growing divide over slavery in the United States. Many supporters worried the language was too direct. Some feared it would hurt his political future. Others thought he was saying too much too soon. What's fascinating is that the speech did not immediately make Lincoln a national hero. In fact, he lost the Senate race. But the speech survived. Newspapers reprinted it. People debated it. And over time, it became one of the defining speeches associated with Lincoln. One thing I always find interesting is how often famous speeches fail to achieve their immediate goal. The speech didn't win Lincoln the office he was seeking, yet it helped establish the reputation that would eventually carry him to the presidency. History sometimes rewards the long game. And speaking of things that carry people along a set path, June 16th also gave Americans a completely different kind of ride. On June 16th, 1884, the first roller coaster in America opened at Coney Island in New York. Now, by modern standards, it wasn't especially fast. It wasn't especially tall. And nobody was being launched upside down. But for people in the 1880s, it was thrilling. The ride was called the Switchback Railway. Passengers climbed aboard small cars and traveled down a gentle incline before being switched onto another track for the return trip. The top speed was only about 6 miles per hour, which means many modern bicycles could outrun it. Yet, crowds loved it. Partly because it offered something unusual, a controlled thrill, a safe dose of excitement. Before long, entrepreneurs realized people were willing to pay money to be scared just a little bit. And that realization built an industry. The roller coasters that followed became taller, faster, steeper, more elaborate. But they all trace part of their history back to that modest attraction at Coney Island. One detail I enjoy is that the original inspiration came from gravity railways used in Pennsylvania coal regions. Someone looked at industrial transportation and thought, what if we did this for fun? Human beings have a remarkable talent for turning practical inventions into entertainment. And then there are moments that change not what people do, but when they do it. On June 16, 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho premiered in New York. Today, it's considered one of the most influential thrillers ever made. But one of its biggest impacts had nothing to do with the famous shower scene. It had to do with time. Before Psycho, movie theaters often operated differently than they do now. Many theaters ran films continuously. People could walk in whenever they wanted, watch part of the movie, stay through the next showing, and eventually see the beginning. Hitchcock hated that idea. He believed audiences needed to experience Psycho from the start. So he insisted that theaters not admit late arrivals. Advertisements warned people. Signs were posted. The message was clear. If you miss the beginning, you miss the movie. That sounds normal today. At the time, it was unusual. In many ways, Psycho helped popularize modern idea of scheduled showtimes and audiences arriving before the film began. The movie itself became a phenomenon. Viewers screamed. Critics argued. Audiences talked about it for weeks. And Hitchcock carefully protected the surprises. He even asked theater owners not to reveal plot details. What's fascinating is that the film changed both filmmaking and moviegoing. Not many movies can claim that. And after spending today's episode around speeches, rides, and movies, it feels fitting to end with someone who helped define comedy for generations. Born on June 16, 1890 in England, Stan Laurel became half of one of the most beloved comedy teams in entertainment history. Together with Oliver Hardy, he created a partnership that audiences still recognize nearly a century later. What made Laurel special wasn't just his timing, it was his character. He often played the innocent dreamer, the man whose confidence greatly exceeded his common sense, the kind of person who could turn a simple task into a disaster without meaning to. The duo made dozens of films together, and their comedy traveled remarkably well. Different countries, different languages, different generations, people still laughed. One thing I appreciate about Laurel and Hardy is how human their comedy feels. Their problems were often small. Moving a piano, fixing something, completing a simple job. Then everything would go spectacularly wrong. Which, if I were being fair, is an experience most people can relate to. Their influence can still be seen in modern comedy, from television sitcoms to internet videos. That's impressive longevity for performers whose peak popularity came nearly 100 years ago. And looking back across today's stories, I noticed that they all involved expectations. Lincoln challenged people to think about the future. Roller coasters gave people a safe way to experience uncertainty. And Hitchcock changed audience expectations about how movies should be watched. Different stories, different centuries. Yet all three asked people to experience something in a new way. Anyway, that's what I ended up finding while working through June 16th. And before I go, here's today's oddly appropriate quote. "Life is too important to be taken seriously." Oscar Wilde. If you'd like to hear more of my work, narration, podcasts, or other projects, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and thanks for wandering through history with me for a while. I'll see you tomorrow.